So, a little while ago, I was writing something in my newsletter about musician income streams, and I want to make some kind of joke like, everyone knows musicians are broke, haha. And I realized as I was writing it that I literally had no basis for saying that. It was something that I'd always thought and something that I'd always heard. So, I went over to Google and I searched, how much money do musicians actually make? And what came up were not helpful results. So I was combing through the first page of results, and it seemed like pretty much all the studies were outdated. Like one was from 2016, one was from before that, like 2011 or something. And I basically decided, man, I have no way of actually knowing if musicians are broke, even though I'm pretty sure that they are. And so I was about to just drop it there and not talk about musician income. But then I realized, hey, I have an email list of like, at the time it was like 5,000 musicians. Why don't I just ask them how much money they make? And maybe some of them will be kind enough to share it with me. So I did that. And as it turns out, musicians are super rich. Now, I'm just kidding. Musicians are pretty broke, and the numbers are maybe even more discouraging than I thought at first, but there are some reasons for hope. So, in this video, I'm going to get down into what musicians are doing that actually works for making money, how much money musicians actually make, and all the details inside of all that. So, let's get into it. Okay, so first things first, a little bit about the sample size of my data so that you know where it's coming from. Obviously, it's a sample. It is not in any way representative of all the musicians everywhere across the world, but it is representative of the 5,000 or so musicians on my list when I asked the survey. So the highest segment of respondents were from the US. I think I had 38 people responding from the US out of 75 total responses. Outside of the US, it was dispersed across a pretty wide range of countries. You had Europe, you had South America, you had some Asian countries. So pretty wide range, but predominantly US. And then the vast majority of respondents to my questions were unsigned indie artists. So I think I only had 4 signed artists out of 75 respondents answering the questions about how they make money. And then in terms of genre, it is pretty widely dispersed as well. The highest percentage of respondents were singer-songwriter with 27%, but a lot of people put other because musicians don't like being put into a box. All right, so now for the bad news. How much money do musicians actually make? As it turns out, my joke was fair that I was going to make. Musicians, the majority of musicians, make less than $1,000 a year based on my survey. So that's not very much. About 1/5 of the survey respondents make between $1,000 and $5,000, so still not very much. And then 11 of the respondents make $25,000 or more, and there were only 2 respondents who make more than $50,000 from music over the course of a year. So, yeah, musicians don't make very much money. So, here's where it gets a little more interesting and hopefully a little bit more hopeful too. How do musicians actually make their money? Now, as you might expect, the most common way to make money is through streaming revenue. But as you also might expect, the artists who list streaming revenue as their top income stream tend to make the lowest amount of money over the course of a given year. But the artists who are in the upper brackets tend to make their income through one of two ways. Either they make it through live performances, so that's touring, that's virtual shows, any live performance that people are paying money to see, or they make it through teaching, so giving lessons and giving lessons. It's interesting to note that other income streams like merch sales, sync licensing, and crowdfunding didn't really account for very many musicians. Like most musicians weren't using those. And then also, they weren't the primary income streams of the top earners. So even though those often get a lot of hype, they didn't seem to practically be used very much, at least by the musicians on my list. And the final thing I'll leave you with, all 3 of the top earners on the survey listed live performances as their top income stream. So both the people who are making over 50,000 and the highest earner in the 25,000 50,000 bracket, all those people were making the money primarily through live performances. So what does it all mean? Well, I guess first of all, it just does confirm the hypothesis that most musicians are pretty broke, and it probably means that if you're watching this, you should forego guacamole when you go to Chipotle. You should pinch your pennies because you don't have too many of them. But for real, I think the most obvious takeaway is that if you want to make more income as a musician, probably the best way to do it is through live performances. It seems like the artists who are making the most money are getting out there and playing their music and selling tickets for people to come see their music. So things like merch, crowdfunding, sync, all that stuff is good supplementary income. And I do know people who are making an income with that, but it seems like the bread and butter of most musicians who are doing music as a living is live performances, touring, and shows. So Let this be your kick in the pants to get out there and play more music for more people. And that's all I've got for today. I will link to this survey. There's a written version of it live at my website, and you can see all the data. I have like the Google Sheet public with all the responses and parse through it yourself if you'd like to. But also, it's understandable if you don't want to get discouraged and you never want to think about this again. Either way, I think the final takeaway I want to leave with is that the point of making music isn't to make money, even though you can make money with music, and that's a good thing. And it's a good thing to build a sustainable career around it. Like, the reason you want to make music is because music is meaningful in and of itself. It's an end in itself. And I say this a bunch of times. I know it comes across as cheesy, but I think that really is true. So don't be discouraged that most musicians really are broke. Get out there, make money, and make a sustainable career as best you can. And remember that your music matters. Good luck.